The sub-basement was already cool when I keyed in, the air tasting faintly of detergent and warm plastic. I like to open the lab alone. The quiet lets me hear. The room before the data, HVAC low, wall clocks ticking out their small authority. The distant thud of an elevator that never reaches this wing. I switched the fluorescents to half power. Too much light teaches the body its day, and we ask people to trust us at night. My hands went through ritual without needing orders. I balanced the electrode tray, checked the paste, and clipped a test lead to the calibration block. Impedance first. Good contact so the brain's tiny signals aren't buried in noise. The meter's green bars rose and steadied. I spoke into the intercom, control to bed 1, latency check, then pressed the talk key again after a beat to hear my voice return. A system has to answer itself before it can answer a patient. People imagine sleep as blankness. It is not. It is structure. On the screen, the EEG, those are brainwave traces, idled in a tidy baseline. EOG for eye movements, EMG for muscle tone, breathing channels for the chest and abdomen, pulse oximetry, a small ruby at the fingertip. A PSG montage is simply the bundle of all of that. A concert of sensors that lets you hear the whole night, at once. When REM comes, rapid eye movement, the dream stage, you see sharp eye flicks and a collapse of muscle tone called atonia. Think of atonia as the body's safety lock. It keeps you from acting out the story your brain is telling. Sleep spindles are brief bursts that help the brain consolidate memory. K-complexes are the single heavy notes the cortex plays when something tugs at attention. Reading a night's recording is like listening to an orchestra section by section. REM is the violin suddenly loud, spindles the quick drum rolls, K-complexes the lone gong. I walked the rooms, 4 beds, 4 one-way panes set like dark eyelids, fresh sheets, cannulae coiled neatly. The red recording LEDs winked when I tested them, each a prick of certainty. 22 years of nights have taught me that truth arrives in millivolts if you're patient, and the paste is right. Dreams, I tell the residents, are neurochemistry with narrative. There is no prophecy in a waveform. I believed that faithfully, until the night the lab answered back. We had come to record sleep. What answered was time. The first subject that night was a middle-aged man with untreated apnea, the kind of patient who arrives already tired of being tired. I measured his neck circumference, logged his Epworth score, and fitted the nasal cannula. He winced when I abraded the scalp lightly for the electrodes. Good contact matters more than comfort. When the room was dark and his breathing steadied, I returned to the control desk and watched the baseline settle. Tidy alpha giving way to theta, chin EMG drifting lower as sleep pressed down. A PSG montage, polysomnography, is simply the full bundle of channels that make sleep visible. EEG for brain waves, EOG for eye flicks, EMG for muscle tone, respiratory belts for chest and abdomen, oxygen at the finger. Think of it as a city map at night. The lights tell you which neighborhoods are waking or quieting. His map grew quiet on schedule. At 03:19, the first oddity arrived, not with spectacle, but as a precision the body seldom manages. Theta bursts, the slow, story-making rhythm of the brain, rose in clean packets, evenly spaced, as if they had metronomes. Theta, in ordinary nights, meanders like a stroll. This was a march. I annotated it, resisting meaning. Patterns are friendly liars. I reminded myself, he's a single patient in a closed room. Morning debriefs are orderly by design. You keep your tone neutral, ask for images, not interpretations. Anything you remember, I said, pen ready. He rubbed at the bridge of his nose. The cannula marks faint as commas. A woman, he said finally, under those bad elevator lights that flicker. There was a clock, 3:19 I think. A nameplate by the door said, "Neuro sleep." She didn't get out. He said it without drama. He looked embarrassed at the end, as most people do when describing a dream. I wrote his words exactly, boxed the time, and underlined it because clinically I am not superstitious, but I am thorough. The lab name on the plate was the thing that bothered me. Dreams usually misname. I sealed the night's data, flagged the REM epoch at CO319 for later review, and told myself the coincidence belonged to the world, not to us. Dreams like elevators because they impersonate movement. Flicker belongs to any fluorescent tube. A clock time anchors memory. We are suggestible. Creatures. Order emerges from noise because the mind insists. 2 nights later, a young woman with insomnia took bed 3. She had the guarded, brittle energy of someone who resents the mattress before she's on it. I kept my questions practical, placed the leads, damped the room noise to a low hiss. Her descent into sleep came reluctant but clean. N2 with lovely sleep spindles, those brief little bursts that help knit daytime learning into fabric. Then a neat drop into REM, the chin tones sliding almost to floor. If the first patient was a map, this one was a blueprint. At 0319, the REM bar lit again. Not unusual by itself. REM cycles recur, but the microstructure matched the earlier night too closely for comfort. The same burst spacing, the same brief, K-complex just before, like a single heavy note the cortex strikes when something tugs at attention. K-complexes belong to N2. Seeing one echo a moment before REM is like hearing a door thud, just as the orchestra raises its bows. Her debrief, late morning, smelled of coffee and warmed plastic. "Elevator," she said, before I asked for guidance. Stupid lights. Same. Flicker. There was a clock, 3:19, and a little plaque. She frowned, searching. "Neuro... sleep? Your wing." She looked at me, then down, as if apologizing for borrowing our name. I felt the air in my chest go thin. Suggestion. Our techs are trained not to seed material. No posters in the halls, no small talk about cases. The control room is sealed behind, one-way glass. I traced the chain for leaks and found none. I shut the door to chatter anyway. No discussion of debrief content, I told the staff. Log only. I locked the audio files, restricted the folder, tightened the retention. Rules. The lab does not get to become a story. At my desk, I played the 2 REM epochs side by side, volume barely open, just enough to lift the room's floor noise. REM breathing is shallow, irregular, a tide that forgets itself. In these 2 recordings, the tide fell and rose together. Inhale lengths matched within a beat. Exhale pauses paired like shoes. EEG traces don't breathe. People do. Different people are not supposed to breathe in duet from separate rooms and separate nights. The brain's rhythms are private. They drift. They do not lock. If you want an analogy, it was like hearing 2 radios, tuned by hand, accidentally catch the same pirate station for 1 minute and then let it go. There is no good reason for it. There is only the fact of it. I wrote no interpretation in my margin, boxed it twice, and told myself this was artifact, an HVAC cycle, a gain setting, a sympathetic tempo the body finds when anxious. I ordered duplicate calibrations for the next run. I told the night to behave like a knight. When the clock in the control room ticked to 0:07 and the fluorescents hummed down to half, I heard my own voice come back in the intercom test, a fraction late. The system answered itself, dutiful, as always. I stared at the timestamp until the digits blurred, then cued the next set of forms. If the first night had been a coincidence, the second wrote a pattern. I did what any rationalist does at the door of a pattern. I locked it, and I waited to see if it would come back with a key. The 3rd week began with protocol. When anomaly threatens to bloom, you smother it with method. I randomized room assignments, stripped labels from bed charts, staggered lights out by 15-minute intervals, and piped in soft white noise, an auditory mask to erase hallway sounds. If the patients were constructing their dreams from rumor or environment, I would blind them to one another and to us. A journalist sat in the control room that week. Ayaan Mir, hired to write a lifestyle piece on the science of nightmares. He watched me shuffle forms and recheck leads with the detached interest of someone looking for color in a story. He wanted character. I wanted silence. It didn't matter. The data converged anyway. The first night, a retired teacher in bed 1. The second, a teenager with restless legs in bed 4. The third, a man with mild narcolepsy in bed 2. Unrelated. Demographics, scattered histories, no chance of cross-contamination. Yet at 03:19, their traces sang together. Each dropped into REM as though pulled by one rope, EEG spiking with the same theta bursts. Ayaan leaned toward the monitors. "That's the same pattern," he said. I nodded, but kept my mouth flat. He didn't know the language, but he recognized symmetry. "I'll explain. The human brain is not a metronome. Even under anesthesia, even in synchronized circadian experiments, individual REM cycles drift by minutes. Milliseconds matter because the nervous system is noisy, like an orchestra that never quite tunes together. Yet here, 3 brains struck the same bar in unison. Imagine strangers on 3 different continents humming the same measure of a song at the same second without hearing one another. That was what the graph told me. Their debriefs the next morning wrote the rest. Flickering elevator. 3. 19 plaque with your name. All 3, spoken independently in embarrassed tones, like schoolchildren caught cheating off the same test. Ayaan frowned into his notebook. "Could your team be planting suggestions?" he asked. His tape recorder clicked on. He wanted me to confess to bias. I told him bias was a coin flip. The mind loves to overcount heads. But coins do not land heads 10 times in a row unless something else is weighting the toss. That afternoon, I pulled the environmental logs. I shut down non-essential devices, cycled the HVAC, measured stray EM fields with a handheld meter, even traced the seams of the Faraday shielding built into the walls. This wing is supposed to be radio silent, radiation quiet, a cocoon for signals so faint they measure in microvolts. All was normal. No leakage, no hum, no hidden feed to explain why dreams in separate skulls had begun speaking the same sentence. The 4th night, the dreams added detail. A file room, drawer labeled QS, and a paper cut on the narrator's fingertip. My name belongs in that range. My drawer lives there. When the patients described it in the morning, I scoffed aloud, almost grateful. At last, a clue I could disprove. Later that afternoon, filing by hand, I slid the drawer out too fast and felt the corner nick my skin. A red bead rose against the fluorescent wash. I stared at it longer than was rational, until the sting became a pulse. Ayaan saw me, bandaging it, and raised his eyebrows. "Coincidence?" he asked. He said it lightly, but his eyes followed the drawer when I slid it shut. He wasn't writing lifestyle anymore. He was writing notes like a man keeping minutes for an inquest. The dual escalation was no longer theoretical. Scientifically, the density of detail was rising. Cross-subject replication no longer just clocks and lights, but specific objects in my immediate environment. Personally, the dreams were circling me like wolves, pulling my name, my work, my blood into their geometry. I wanted to believe we were still measuring error, still building artifacts out of silence. But silence does not cut your skin. That night, when the monitors hummed back to life, I felt the air in the control room differently. Not sterile, not neutral, but tuned. As though the fluorescents were not just lighting, but vibrating with some frequency the rest of us couldn't hear. Ayan sat beside me with his recorder, and for the first time, I envied his ignorance. He thought he was watching me measure sleep. He didn't realize we were listening to something that answered from behind the glass. The logs from that week still exist, neatly filed, green bars rising steady, annotations boxed. Any auditor would find them professional. Only in the margins did my handwriting falter. Half notes, underlines, the word impossible scrawled twice, then crossed out as if crossing it out could annul it. Rationalism is a habit, but habits bend when three strangers dream your death on schedule. By the 7th night, I no longer asked if it would repeat. I asked how much closer it would come. Ayan had been circling the question for days, his reporter's notebook already heavy with timestamps and my evasions. On the 8th night, he put it plainly. If you're so certain this is contamination, let me sleep here. I'll be your control. I should have refused. Journalists don't belong in research protocols, but part of me wanted him wired. Wanted another skull in the circuit that kept catching me at its center. Perhaps I hoped his data would break the sequence, drag the whole matter back into error. Rationalists sometimes grasp at disproof the way others grasp at prayer. He let me place the leads without complaint, his hair flattened in awkward patches where the paste dried. I calibrated his PSG montage the way I had with every other patient. EEG for brain rhythms, EOG for eye flicks, EMG for chin tone, belts for chest and abdomen, oximeter glowing ruby on his finger. I explained the system as I worked. This bundle captures the night from multiple angles. Think of it as microphones around an orchestra. You can tell which instrument is carrying the tune. He laughed once nervously and said, "Let's hope my orchestra doesn't play yours." For 3 hours his traces behaved with the steadiness of a textbook, spindles in N2, K-complexes answering the occasional creak of the building, slow waves widening into the plateau of deep sleep. I watched the monitors with relief I didn't want to admit, sipping bitter coffee at my 0007 ritual. The control room smelled of antiseptic wipes and the paper he kept tearing into small squares as he fought off restlessness before sleep. Outside, the sub-basement hummed with mechanical life, the elevator thudding occasionally, though it never came to our floor. At 0319, the relief died. His EEG spiked into REM with a precision that landed like a knife. Eye traces flickered, chin tone collapsed, breathing shallowed. More than that, the pattern mirrored the others. The same pre-REM K-complex, like a door closing. The same theta, bursts in neat packets. 300 seconds that felt inevitable before they began. I logged it, hands stiff on the keyboard, already knowing what his debrief would bring. He woke groggy, sat at the table with the paper cup of post-study coffee, and rubbed his temples. "I saw it," he said, before I asked a single question. "Elevator, flickering lights, your name on the plaque, and you, in the corner, on the floor." He looked at me with a mixture of apology and fear, as though repeating it might make it real. My pen froze above the form. He gave me the words anyway, slower this time, like a confession. Explaining why this is impossible is simple. Dreams are personal constructs, scraps of memory and sensation stitched into narratives the brain rehearses during REM. Two strangers can both dream of falling or being chased, because those are archetypes, but to dream the same elevator, the same nameplate, the same clock time, that is not archetype. That is transcription. It is as if separate typewriters produced the same typo at the same second without ever sharing a page. The following night brought a new subject, a man with delayed sleep phase. His REM epoch arrived late, but at 0319 he too described the elevator, this time adding a detail that knotted my stomach. 3 drops of water forming a triangle on the ceiling above the doors. There is no leak in that elevator. I checked the building maintenance logs, the ceiling panels, the pipes, all dry. Until, minutes later, a burst pipe in the neurology wing above us released just enough water to stain the tiles. Maintenance confirmed the leak ran at 03:18 to 03:22. The dream was not echoing reality, it was previewing it. Worse followed. During REM, muscle tone is supposed to collapse. REM atonia, the paralysis that prevents us from acting out dreams. Without it, we would flail, injure ourselves, step bodily into narratives not meant for movement. But 2 patients that week sat upright mid-REM, while their EEGs still screamed dreaming. Their eyes flicked behind closed lids, their bodies rigid, as mannequins, breath shallow but steady. Security footage confirmed it. To move without waking is a paradox. It should not happen. The safety lock had failed, yet the orchestra kept playing. Watching their bodies sit while their brains remained asleep was like seeing mannequins animated by an unseen puppeteer. The staff began to break. 2 techs requested transfers. A resident muttered the word "cursed" in the hallway when he thought I couldn't hear. I doubled down, burying myself in measurement. Logs grew thicker, annotations sharper. I told myself that as long as I could chart the anomaly, I still owned it. Yet in the quiet of the control room, I admitted to myself that the lab no longer felt neutral. It felt tuned, like an instrument resonating to a note no one had struck. On the 12th night, combing through synchronized REM recordings, I caught something beneath the static. A faint hiss through the intercom feed, the kind of background wash we usually ignore, but layered in it was a voice. My voice. Flat, clinical, carrying no emotion. "Don't take the elevator." I played it again, checked the time code. 03:19. The same second the traces had locked. The same second the dreams had birthed me into their corridors. I had never spoken those words into the system. Yet there they were, archived, stamped, reproducible. I sat in the red glow of the dark room, lamp long after, the hiss still echoing in my head. My voice, advising me from nowhere, tethered to the same impossible clock. If the dreams were a broadcast, then the intercom had joined the chorus, and if I could hear myself speaking from the recordings of a night already lived, then perhaps I was not the only one tuned. When the clock in the control room crept toward the next midnight, I pressed the intercom test key. Silence answered. Then, half a beat later, silence hissed back, as though waiting to fill itself with words. The intercom's whisper did not leave me. For 3 nights, I heard it again, faint under the monitor hiss, never more than one phrase. "Don't take the elevator." Always my voice, always at 03:19. By then I had stopped sleeping at home. The cot in the file room became my bed, the monitors my lullaby. I told myself I was protecting the data, but in truth, I was circling the anomaly like a moth at glass. Ayan brought me tea instead of questions now. His notes had grown darker, the margins less about lifestyle angles and more about dates, times, and what he called the sequence. I began to map it physically. Every REM epoch at 03:19 I printed and pinned across the corkboard. Hypnograms, raw EEG, EOG eye darts, even the breath waveforms. Seen alone, each was an artifact. Seen together, they formed a curve tightening with every night, like a funnel narrowing toward a point. A hypnogram, I tell my residents, is a simple chart. Time on the horizontal axis. Stages of sleep stacked vertically. In normal life, it looks like a sawtooth, cycles rising and falling with some looseness. These looked like waves rearing taller and sharper, as if racing toward a seawall. Each night, the synchrony grew more precise, the details more crowded, the dreams more insistent. I needed to break it. I designed what I called the elevator test. On the 16th night, I ordered facilities to shut down the central elevator bank. Power rerouted, doors sealed. A guard stationed at the landing with keys in hand. I documented every step, time-stamped, photographs, a signed statement. If the dream recurred unchanged, then no contamination theory could hold. At dawn, the patients described it anyway. The same elevator, flickering, 0319. But this time a new feature intruded. Yellow tape strung across the stairwell, stamped "Do Not Use." That tape did not exist in our building. I checked with facilities. They laughed. Then, 3 days later, a repaint crew closed the stairwell and strung identical tape in the exact phrasing. I escalated. I stripped my nameplate, Neurosleep, from the lab door and locked it in my desk. That night, a patient dreamt of seeing the plate reflected in elevator steel, the letters reversed. The next day, a janitor, meaning well, taped up a temporary, printed plate. The mirrored letters appeared in the reflection exactly as described. The dreams were not only predictive, they were self-correcting. Remove one element, they bent around it. The system was not just describing events, it was converging. On them, I drafted what I called the temporal receiver hypothesis. Ayaan listened, frowning, but he recorded me anyway. My theory was simple. The lab's shielding, its architecture, and the circadian disruption of multiple sleepers had created a resonance, like a standing wave in time. Our subjects were tuned into a near-future broadcast, and the strongest node, anchoring the signal, was me. I used an analogy I barely believed. A wine glass sings when a note matches it. The lab is the glass. Time is the note. For the first time in 22 years, I admitted fear into my notes. If observation sharpened the predictions, then my recording itself was honing the blade. The more I measured, the more exact the event became. The 19th night proved it. Every subject in the lab, 5 this time, including Ayaan, locked into REM at 0319 within 5 milliseconds of one another. Their eyes flicked in perfect tandem. The chest belts rose and fell as though one pair of lungs powered them all. The monitors hummed like a single engine. At the same second, the cameras in the corridor caught the elevator lights flickering. A building-wide hiccup, facilities reported later. A transformer test scheduled for that precise 2 minutes, unknown to me until then. The patients woke pale, their debriefs echoing one another. The same elevator, the same plaque, the same moment, and now the same final line, heard over the intercom in my own flat voice. Don't take the elevator. I resolved to obey. The climax came on the 21st night. At 0316, the fire alarm shrieked. Acrid smoke crept through the ventilation. A false alarm, perhaps, but real enough. In its pressure, protocol demands nearest exit. Staff and patients funneled into the hall, clustering at the elevator despite signage chaos. I froze. The tape from the dreams screamed at me. Don't take the elevator. Ayaan grabbed my arm, eyes wide. I pulled him toward the stairwell. There, strung across the landing, hung yellow "Do Not Use" tape. Fresh paint glistened on the walls, and above us, a water stain spread into 3 perfect drops forming a triangle. We hesitated. Behind us, the elevator doors stuttered. Lights flickered exactly as described. A nurse inside swayed, fainted. A crash cart was summoned. No one died. The cart revived her, but the tableau matched every detail except the fatal one. The woman in the corner of the elevator was not me. By not stepping in, had I diverted the prediction? Or had I simply passed it on? The sequence had reached its end point, but I was no longer certain who had been its target. Ayaan, pale, asked me, in the stairwell, did we change it, or just change who? I had no answer. Back in the control room, I stared at the clock as its red digits ticked to 03.19. The monitors quivered, then fell silent. The synchrony broke. For the first time in weeks, the orchestra stopped playing the same bar. But the whisper on the intercom lingered in my head, as if waiting for the next refrain. Hospitals demand order, even when none exists. Every event, no matter how chaotic, must be reduced into a record. Typed lines, timestamps, asterisks where the unexpected tried to intrude. That was the discipline that shaped me, and it was the same discipline that failed me. I sat in the control room the morning after the fire alarm with ribs tight from smoke and fatigue, drafting the official incident report. My keyboard clicked, its neutral rhythm. Error 316, false fire alarm triggered. Staff evacuated patient safely. One transient syncope episode in elevator. Patient revived with crash cart. Evacuation concluded 03:23. No fatalities. It was all true. It was also incomplete. What I did not include were the weeks of converging dreams, the synchrony to the millisecond, the intercom voice in my register. A report admits only what can be corroborated, and medicine requires consensus reality. EEGs that predict plumbing leaks, voices speaking from static, dreams that cite nameplates, those are not corroborations. Those are contagions. Administration praised my composure, the way I had guided evacuation calmly. Facilities asked for my logs, which I provided, neatly stripped of anomalies. Legal requested a summary for liability purposes. In their eyes, I was steady. In my own, I was an instrument gone out of tune. Ayan came to see me that evening. He carried his notebook still, but he had stopped writing in it. Instead, he placed a small gift on the desk, an old-fashioned wind-up clock, brass, face frozen at 03:19. A reminder, he said softly, or maybe a warning. His eyes searched mine for permission to print his article. I told him no. Not because I feared ridicule, but because the act of pressing words into paper felt like striking the note again, making the glass sing. The resignation letter was brief, 22 years of service in sleep medicine. Effective immediately, I withdraw from all clinical and research duties. Reason, personal. I did not use the word fear. I did not use the word fate. But in my private draft, the one I never submitted, I wrote, "Measurement failed not by error, but by scope. The lab recorded something real for which science has no shelf." On my last night in the wing, I walked the rooms slowly. Empty beds with their cotton sheets folded, cannulae coiled, LEDs dark. The silence was heavier than any monitor hum. I stood in the control room one last time and switched the intercom to test. For a moment, only static. Then the hiss thickened, and through it came my own voice, time-stamped in the corner. 03:19. "Don't take the elevator." Identical in tone to the recordings I had locked away. Words I had never spoken, words I would always hear. I shut the system down, locked the drawers, slid my badge across the desk for the next physician to claim. When I stepped into the corridor, the fluorescent hum followed me. An elevator arrived without being called, its doors parting to show an empty box lit by flickering light. The plaque above it trembled faintly in the airflow, as if awaiting my name to be taped back on. I took the stairs, and as I descended, I thought, if the future can be overheard, then survival may not be about resisting it. It may only be about knowing when not to listen.